Hey, lovely people, welcome to Internet Storytime with C. I am so glad you're here. On this channel, we dive into the juiciest internet story times, sharing relatable tales, wild experiences, and everything in between. So, grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's get the story time started.
Hey guys, I'm back with another creepy story. So this story, I'm gonna talk about my grandmother, but she was really my great grandmother because her daughter died like a week or two after me and my twin sister was born, so I never really got to meet her. So she became my grandmother. So as my grandmother got older, her eyes start changing colors. One eye was a beautiful, beautiful blue, ice blue. It was gorgeous. And the other one was like a beautiful gray. It was like a light gray, and it was so gorgeous. And we thought maybe she had cataracts. Took her to the doctor, and they was like she didn't have cataracts. And we was like, okay. So I used to just go home, and one day I was just staring into her eyes. I just couldn't stop looking at them. And she closed her eyes, and she said, "Stop looking me in my eyes." And I was like, "Why?" She said, "Because I have snake eyes. Something I have snake eyes." I was like, "Snake eyes?" She was like, "Yeah." She said, "That's what they call it." And I said, "What that mean?" She still she still kept her eyes closed. She said, "I can see, and I don't want to see." She said, "I don't want you to look me in my eyes, so just stop, just back up away from me." And so I said, "Okay." So I backed up, and so I thought that was weird. So weeks later, my boyfriend, who I'll talk about in other videos, his grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and so it progressed very rapidly. So it went to her brain. So next thing you know, a week after they diagnosed her, they was telling everybody to come home, and she was dying. And so she was on her deathbed. You can hear the death rattle. So they had called the priest over to do the last rites. So they had all the family around her bed. Everybody was holding hands. And I really loved her. I really loved this woman. She's the only one I liked in the whole family, for real. I didn't care for the rest of them. But anywho, so I'm around the bed, everybody holding hands, and I am boo-hoo crying. I am crying my eyes out. I was the only one crying, for real. Everybody else looking at me like, "The hell you crying for? She ain't your grandmama." But I loved her like she was. And so after, she gave her last breath, and the priest left. So I went back home, and my grandmother was sitting at the kitchen table, and she said, she really appreciates you crying for her. And I stopped, and I was like, "Ma'am," she was like, "She really appreciates you." And I was like, "Who?" And she said, well, I'm not going to say her name. She said, "Miss A." She said, "Miss A said, thank you. Somebody cried for her. That made her feel good, made her feel loved, that somebody cried for her." And I was like, "But then what you talking about?" She said, "Y'all was standing around her bed. The priest came." So I'm looking at my grandmother because my grandmother didn't go with me. And I was like, "Well, how do you know?" She said, "Because I saw the whole thing." And I was like, "What did you see for real?" My grandmother said, "I saw that y'all all was standing around the bed holding hands." And she said, she was on her bed. She said she was dying. The priest came, and she said that you was crying. She said you was the only one crying. Okay, it's going on part two. Okay, so this part two. So my grandmother said that you was the only one crying, and she said, "I saw you." She said, "I was in one corner of the room looking at y'all." And she said, "Miss A," she said she was in the other corner of the room looking down at everybody. And I was like, "What?" She said, "Thank you. That made her feel loved that you cried for her and nobody else did. And she really thank you." And I was like, she said she appreciate that. And I was like, okay. So I'm looking at my grandmother like, "What you see for real?" And my grandmother said, "I saw everything." And my grandmother named everybody, but she didn't name everybody. She described everybody that was in the room. And she described the one man house because my grandmother was like, "I saw y'all." She said, "Because the way you had to go, if you're family and friends, you come through the back door." My grandmother said, she described this one my house to a T. Now, mind you, my grandmother never went there. And so never went through the back door or whatever. So my grandma described this one my house to a T. She said, "I saw you. I was there, but you didn't see me." She said, "But I saw everything." And I was like, "What?" So she's like, "I'm not going to talk about it no more." She said, "I just want to let you know that," she said, "she really appreciates you and she love you." And she just turned back around and started reading her newspaper. And I was like, okay. And another incident, when I moved to Montgomery, my grandmother, she was in her late 80s, so she really couldn't move, travel for real. So when I went back home to visit her, and she said, "I'm so proud of you." She said, because I had got me and my boyfriend, but we got married. She said, I like your house." She said, "You got a beautiful house." And I was like, "How you know what my house looked like?" She said, "Because I saw it." And I was like, "No, you didn't." She said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "What my house look like?" And so my grandmother described the house to a T. She described the whole outside of the house. When she walked in, she said, "You go through the doors, you got pictures on both sides of the wall." She went in my den. She said, "I see your den. You got your green couch with your little white stripes to it." I mean, my grandma described my whole house, and she never been. And I was shocked. I was just sitting there looking stupid. I was like, and she said, "I told you I got snake eyes." She said, "I can see." And she said, "That's why I don't want y'all to look me in my eyes. I just certain things I don't want to see." And I was like, "Oh my God." So yeah, so I miss that old lady. She was a joy. And yeah, we got on her nerve, but I miss her to this day. But that's the story of my grandmother. All right, bye guys.
This is one of those stories that makes you pause and reflect. I can't imagine the things our granny would have seen in a lifetime. Experiences like this are the reason people believe that the spiritual controls the physical. Have you had any encounter with someone like this? Do you believe in snake eyes or other supernatural gifts? Share your thoughts with me in the comment section. And that's all, guys. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe button for more juicy stories.